The Imperial Palace was vivid with sound servants and nobles quickly shuffling about its halls. The divine gateways had resurfaced and ignited, revealing the way back to Vera. The prince walked alone, watching his feet to avoid being spoken to. He was deep in thought. Every plot he had set against his mother had failed. All he could hope to do was keep her sated with alcohol, forcing her to the confines of her chambers. He stopped walking as another set of feet entered his field of view. The prince raised his head slightly to see one of his closest friends, a dwarf by the name of Ludrin.
Why would you look at that? A prince blessed by the divines and tainted with corruption,
the dwarf said, stroking his scraggly, dark-brown beard.
How goes your plotting?
Ludrin. Have you still yet to learn social cues? A person walking with his head down more than likely does not want to be spoken to. The prince nodded as two nobles scurried by, giving him quick bows. Follow. Now, he said sharply to the dwarf, who simply chuckled like mad, imitating the noble's quick bow.
Right away, your royalness.
Ludrin sneered in an Empyrean accent, closely following the young elf. The two entered the king's solarium. No one was allowed to enter without the prince or queen present. The prince sat at his father's desk, the Empyrean crest carved into the wood. Ludrin sat at the desk, picked up the chalice, and examined it.
Crap work. I could have done better with my eyes closed, you know,
he exclaimed, slamming the chalice back into its place. How did you get into the palace, Ludrin? The elf said, frustratedly rubbing his temples.
I walked through the damn gate like a normal person would. What do you mean, how did you get into the palace? Sometimes I wonder why I'm not in charge.
The dwarf muttered that last bit under his breath. What is so important that it couldn't wait until we met in Vera?
Wow, Paizu, I'm deeply offended that you think I can't just want to visit my friend in his lovely home.
Ludrin placed his hand over his heart and looked saddened. Paizu simply glared, unamused.
Well, if you must know, Audhan is claiming he'll go a-squealing if you don't triple the gold you already gave him. I'm sure you know what comes after that. Killing a king is treason around these parts.
He spat into the chalice as both he and Paizu looked at the portrait of King Altorius. I still find it amazing how much we look alike. The only trait I got from my mother was her hair color, and priesthood, I suppose, Paizu said, stroking his long blonde hair a bit.
Did you hear me, boy? Audhan will expose your
Let him. I will end him where he stands. The full power of the divines will set down and smite him in his place. He stood straighter, and a menacing smirk crossed his lips. I will not give way to such baseless claims. It's a word of a commoner against a word of a grieving royal. Ludrin leaned back, as even he could see the slight red haze forming along the boy's eyes. He stroked his beard and nodded.
All right. But who is in control now?
Paizu once again sat in his father's chair and shook his head, pushing what evil lied within him back from whence it came. I am always in control, Ludrin, Paizu said, his skin quickly getting a bit paler as the dwarf slowly nodded and the red haze faded.
How does one so loved and cared for get so twisted?
One realizes that they're just a pawn in their mother's eternal escape from destruction, and all she cares for is self-preservation. And I refuse to be a pawn when I'm a future king. As for the Audhan situation, his best bet would be vowing his loyalty now. For if he betrays me once we are in Vera, I will show no mercy, and I'll have the full weight of the looming darkness at my back. With that statement, the prince left the dwarf sitting in his father's desk and left the solarium. Let the dwarf out of the palace. He reeks of strong liquor, he said to one of the guards, then continued to his original task. He reached his mother's chamber and opened the large door. There, on the large canopy bed in the center of the room she sat, several servants near her, one of which had a tray with more than a few chalices on it. She looked over to her son and stood.
Would you all please leave us the room?
She spoke softly, returning the bow the servants gave her. They left hurriedly, and Queen Makinoji spoke yet again.
You look pale. Have you been eating?
She asked, walking towards the boy and reaching out to stroke his cheek. But he shied away from his mother. "Stop that!" he shouted, stepping away from her. He always felt weak in her presence. She wasn't like his father, who had always challenged him. She was manipulative in the way of showing him love and affection. When he was younger, his hand was always entwined with his mother's. He never left her side.
Stop what? What have I done?
She was a bit taller than him, so she crouched to his level, grabbed both of his hands and looked him directly in his eyes.
What can I do? You're holding me hostage, which will prove nothing. You are a weak child, not worthy of the crown you forced your father to vacate. You orchestrated all of this, so stop sulking and tell me why you've come.
The boy stared. He looked as if he were about to break into tears and hug his mother, begging her forgiveness. His momentary lapse of judgment passed, and he ripped his hands from hers. No. Enough. The Lord's wish for you to appoint a regent tonight. I personally favor Lord Eolas. The queen grabbed the boy's face and pulled him in close.
I will choose a regent as and when I see fit. The lords may complain all they wish, but I am the sole ruler of the Empyreans for now, and that is your doing,
she said, releasing his face, pushing him back gently. She walked back to her bed, grabbing one of the chalices and sipping the wine from it.
Was that all, Pai?
The boy's face grew red with anger, but he dare not challenge her in earshot of the valet. He nodded while spinning on his heels and leaving the chamber. Before he could even realize it, he found himself walking the palace grounds. Even out here, there were servants and nobles buzzing about. Paizu kept his head down. His anxiety grew. His mother had become an unexpected variable in all of his plans. If she too decided to venture to Vera, they would be forced to give up their claim to the Empyrean throne. Paizu's head came into contact with something sturdy. He looked up to see an orc standing before him.
Ah, Your Highness, I apologize. How irresponsible of me.
The orc adjusted himself and continued to look down at the young prince.
Are you injured, sire?
The orc had a long black ponytail and stood much taller than the uncommonly short elven prince. For some reason, the orc had caught his eye. Paizu wasn't sure of the feeling per se, but he knew it did not bode well for his plans. Even with that knowledge, he couldn't contain himself. I'm fine. Are you all right? He asked, adjusting his tunic and crown.
My lord, I mean no offense. I am a boulder, and you are but a pebble.
Paizu smiled at his retort, a genuine smile which was rare for the prince. As the orc tried to step past him, the prince quickly blocked his path. You know me, but I do not know you. May I ask your name? The prince asked, tilting his head slightly. The orc laughed, the sound resonating through each of Paizu's bones. The young prince was all but melted.
Basu, my lord. One of the envoys tasked with protecting the war chief, whilst he is here in your palace.
Paizu nodded. He needed to end the conversation now. Well, it was lovely meeting you, Basur. I have things to attend to, as I'm sure you do also. May our paths cross again, the prince said, stepping past him.
Yes, and maybe next time it won't be by error.
The orc gave a devilish grin and a quick wink that seemed to be filled with seduction. As soon as he rounded the corner and was out of sight, the prince pressed himself against the wall and began breathing heavily. What a naive mess he had gotten himself into. With an orc, no less. A male orc. Who could he talk to about this? And what would he even say? He got up, wandering the halls a bit, before finding himself in front of his mother's chambers once more. He gently knocked.
Enter.
As he opened the door and walked in, his mother stood, shocked.
So you know how to knock now, I see,
she said, taking a long sip from her glass of wine.
What mess have you caused now, child?
The prince told the Aoke to take leave and closed a heavy wooden door behind him.
Ah, so you're finally going to off me like you did your father.
The queen chuckled a bit, and still sipped her wine. Mother, I've created an issue I can't handle. Paizu turned to her, his cheeks tear-stained and eyes reddened. Makinoji knew her son to be many things. He was ruthless, manipulative, intelligent, truly kind to anyone who wasn't in his way. However, in all his life, she had never known him to cry.
Tell me, what pains you?
An orc, by the name of Basura, has caught my eye, the prince said, hanging his head in shame.
Borza. That is commonly a male name in the Orcish tongue, is it not?
Her eyes narrowed, as well as saddened by the mention of orcs. He is male. He couldn't even think to finish his sentence.
When did you meet this Borza?
She questioned, pouring herself more of her wine. Today, in the garden, I accidentally bumped into him, the prince exclaimed, sitting beside her on the bed.
Then the Renkai plot against your throne, my son. No one will ever truly love you. They'll always want you for something you have, and that, my son, is the curse our namesake bears.
She lifted her glass upwards, as if giving a toast before downing whatever remained within it.